Hi, welcome to Living Catholic. I'm David Anders from the Department of Education in the Diocese of Birmingham. With me today is Sister Madeline Marie Van Dillen from the Sister Servants of the Eternal Word. We're on location at Casa Maria Convent and Retreat House in Irondale. Sister Madeline, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
So, as you know, our own Bishop, Bishop Reka, has called for a year of the parish and the Eucharist. And it seems like a timely thing to do, given that the last year people have been away from their parish and perhaps away from the Eucharist more than at any other time in recent memory. So we're really trying to explore different ways to come back and connect with the life of the parish, with our Eucharistic Lord, and with the larger Catholic community, so that we're not living, just behind a screen in a virtual Catholic life, although here we are broadcasting on a screen, right? But that's the topic. So I thought, you're somebody who has made Catholic community really integral to your discipleship as a follower of Christ. And not only in your religious life, but also in your apostolate, in your ministry to the external world, and in your growing up. Your own vocation story is very rooted in the Catholic community. So I thought that's what we could talk about. If you don't mind, could we start? Maybe just give us a thumbnail sketch of your own vocation to religious life.
Sure. So I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and everybody always says that when I'm around here. They're like, "Where are you from?" St. Louis.
No, that's the Rome of the West, they call it, right?
Clearly, yes, the Rome of the West, and it's totally a Catholic environment. Like, it's totally different from Birmingham.
Yep.
And so my family was Catholic. My grandparents had been Catholic, and it was just a really amazing thing. But even then, I was just reflecting on my own story. And so when I was younger, we were at St. Strokeman Parish in St. Charles, Missouri. And it was funny because I was like, well, we were really super active in the parish. My parents were pretty much in charge of the ladies and men's club. I went to the Catholic school. My sister and I played all of our sports for the parish teams. And so we were super, our whole life revolved around our parish, really except the faith. And it's a unique thing because, that is, though, the roots of my vocation, too, especially at the Catholic school. And so I really, we still had a few sisters at our school at that point. It was the early 80s into the 90s, or the late 80s into the early 90s. But those sisters were just a beautiful example of Christ, especially our principal, Sister Jeanette. And so we had gotten, my first thoughts of the religious life is a beautiful life were when I was in the first grade. And it wasn't like I'm going to be a sister. Some people are I knew when I was in first grade, but it was that first attraction. And because Sister Jeanette, sometimes my dad would drop me off at school early because he had to go to work. And so she'd see me out there waiting. And so she'd take me into Mass with her, really early. And those were, to me, the most beautiful Masses because there was nobody there. There was no music. It was just something kind of mysterious. And I had no clue what was going on, but I just really enjoyed being there because it was just such a beautiful experience. And then also, we were, I guess those sisters had given us a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and we had this sister come in, and she was telling about her own vocation story in first grader language. Mm-hmm. And so she said that being a sister was like being like Mary. And so here was Mary, who was beautiful. And then I was like, I would like that. I'd like to be like Mary. And then the other thing she said, which I think is really funny, is that she said, we get to wear whatever we want. And so I didn't know she was talking about not wearing a habit because I didn't know sisters wore habits. I was just thinking, I had gone to public school for kindergarten and I loved picking out my own outfits. And so being in Catholic school, it was I hate this uniform. And so I was like, this is the best of both worlds. Like, you can be like Mary and you can wear whatever
And
you
you can
want.
wear whatever you want.
And so, like, those are very, that's how a 6-year-old's mind works sometimes. But it was, I've never forgotten that as kind of the first attraction.
No, I think you're probably the first person I've ever met who said her attraction to religious life was the hope of like a variety in one's wardrobe.
Yeah.
Right? How'd that work out for you?
Well, obviously, I don't have much variety.
Right.
So kind of ironic, but it spoke to my heart then.
That's beautiful. So what was it about the life and character of the sisters themselves that attracted you? Because you said you saw something
Yeah.
in their life itself, and it was.
It was just that they were just so, like, I mean, I was taught, so my principal in grade school from 1st to 6th grade was a sister, and then my 5th grade teacher, who we always used to tease, like we'd say, oh, she's Sister Cruella, but really, because she was Sister Luella, but she was actually a really strong Catholic woman. And my 6th grade teacher was an elderly nun. My 6th grade math teacher was Sister Rosetta, and she was just the most caring soul I think I've ever been taught by. And then in high school, even, we had Spark Hill Dominicans. So our librarian was she's still alive, Sister Jean Margaret. She was really a great friend to me. And so I'm the convent librarian now, and I really think everything I learned from Sister Jean Margaret. And our principal is Sister Carolyn, and she was just, like, she was somebody I could go to if I said, this isn't quite right in our religion class. What do you think, Sister Carolyn? Or, could we maybe do something like this? And she always was there. And so it was just something kind of, they were relatable. They were all older, but it was like they were real witnesses of religious life too.
Now, you said earlier that your whole social life surrounded the parish, the school. You were inundated with Catholic things, and yet at some level it hadn't really penetrated to your interior life.
Right.
So what made the change? When did you wake up to the transcendent that was all around you?
So when I was in 7th grade, we changed parishes to St. Joe Cottleville. And at St. Joe, so my parents had been super active at the other parish, and so they kind of were like, well, let's get involved. Maybe not to the extent we were involved, but so there was this ad in the bulletin to sell gift certificates. And so my mom's like, I could do that, You go once every other week, I think it was. And so it was the place where they sold the gift certificates was in our parish library. And so our parish library...
You have a thing with libraries, don't you?
Yeah, I love libraries. So anyways, our parish library was run by this amazing couple named Steve and Angie Bennett. And the more because I would hang out there too, because I love libraries. And so Steve and Angie really, they just started talking to my mom. And I think it wasn't even... They didn't push anything either, but my mom, just by being around them, and then they'd say, maybe you should read this book or whatever. And so, Steve and Angie ended up, they were, running our devotional life of our parish. So they were in charge of First Friday Adoration. They were in charge of, perpetual help devotions. They led the rosary after Mass. And so they were really the rock of our parish, which it was a quiet way too of leading. And so my mom, by getting to know them, and by me also, because we'd spend time with them, and I mean, they were just a real witness of what a real Catholic life lived out is. So my mom started going. That first Lent, she said, you know what, I'm going to go to daily Mass every single day during Lent. And so she did, and then that turned into, let's pray the rosary, let's do the Divine Mercy Novena, let's do this. And then we had this one really good priest come, and so he started promoting enthronement of the Sacred Heart. So all of these families that were kind of like-minded we'd go once a week, I think, to each family's house, and the priest would bless the house. We'd say a rosary all together, and then he'd do the enthronement, and then we would, have like a little fellowship time with each other. And so that really instilled in me that love of the rosary, especially. And so as my mom and I, like, I would say, especially the two of us together, like, we started doing things. And it wasn't like I was always willing, like, because I was a teenager also. And so she would sometimes say, let's go to a Life in the Spirit seminar. It's like, I don't want to go to a Life in Spirit seminar. She's like, I'll buy you a Slurpee. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. And so, which she'll probably hear this and say, yep, it's the Slurpees. But it was really those types of things really impacted me. And so at one point, because our parish didn't really do anything youth ministry-wise, and so my mom really wanted me to get into like a good youth group. And so she said, I guess she thought I want to get her into Life Teen. And so my thought was, I don't want to go to Life Teen. And so she had this plan one Sunday. It was like the first Sunday of Lent. She said, let's redecorate your room today. You can go and we'll go get all the stuff, and then we can go to Mass in the evening. So I was like, okay, I'll go. And so the priest at the time was Father Mark Bazada, and he was giving this. He said it was the first homily in a series that he was going to do all that. And I'm like, I like that first one. I'll go next week. And then we'll go the next week.
So,
and then...
so was this was a ruse, like to bump from morning Mass to evening Mass, because she knew what was going to happen that night?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got Slurpees.
We've got. My mother was a genius.
She was tricky. She was tricky. Well, you said something fascinating to me. Like, we started out, here you are, just inundated with Catholic stuff.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by Catholic everywhere. But what really began to change the life of your family was a friendship.
It was, yes.
And a lot of times we think about evangelism in terms of, well, what's the program we can put on in our parish? Can we buy this curriculum? Can we teach this class?
Right.
Can we bring in this speaker? You had all that.
Yeah.
And yet it was a friendship that really began to awaken your family to a deeper relationship with Christ. And then mom being sneaky.
Mom being sneaky. Mom was definitely sneaky.
Okay, so you got involved in Life Teen.
I did, and then I still wasn't going to the catechetical life nights afterwards. It wasn't until, so my last day of my sophomore year of high school, my dad was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. And so it was kind of one of those things like where you just, like when you're a kid, you don't think your parents are going to ever get sick.
Right.
And he was only 40, and so it was kind of, and his dad had died of colon cancer when he was a teenager, and so it was just thinking, this is so awful. Like, my dad's gonna die, like, great. But I kind of at the same time had this peace, like God was kind of, like, not audibly speaking, but it was just this kind of awareness of, God's gonna be there for me. And so I got a friend, and I said, I'm too afraid to go to Life Teen by myself. Will you come with me, and we can do this all summer? And so my mom would pick up the other kid, Matthew, and she took us there, and she'd sit there and eat Mexican food while we were there because we weren't old enough to drive. But that totally changed my life, because when I was connected into that Life Teen program, like, my youth minister really, like now they say you discipled, but like he cared. And so I had him kind of always encouraging me to grow, always it was this presence in my life. And also I had some of the core members who were like young adult women, and they just, they'd come to my soccer games or my dance recitals or my band concerts. And it was just kind of like, wow. And so it turned into this point where, like, my junior year, I was pretty much like living at church, like, because we had Wednesday night prayer group, like we had praise and worship and kind of intercessory prayer on Wednesdays. We did this group in the summer where we called it Holy Rollers, and we'd go to a park every afternoon, and we would rollerblade and pray the rosary. And it was just kind of, it was great. And some of those friendships I still have to this day. Like, they're amazing friends. And it's been, 25 or 20 years, I guess, since then. But it's an amazing, like, that was what really started me, like, getting serious about my faith. And so,
Now, you said it so quickly that it'd be easy to pass over, but you said something that just really astonished me. It really amazed me. You were faced with an unbelievable tragedy,
yeah,
an unimaginable tragedy, and yet you said at that age you had a profound sense that God would accompany you
right.
through the greatest tragedy of your life at that point. And then immediately, if I understand you, God did that by putting people in your life who could be the face of God's mercy to you when you needed it most.
That's exactly right. Like,
That is really astonishing.
yeah, and it was almost immediate, like, within that time. And I don't even think, like, that they knew, like, my dad was sick at that point, but it was God gave that. Like, it was totally from the hand of God.
So looking back, I mean, do you feel like there's a narrative of your life,
Yeah.
a story, and God is writing that story to bring you where you are?
Absolutely.
Let's move on to university life, because I know you were deeply involved in a community of Catholics at the university that also contributed to your formation, right?
Right. So I ended up, because of Steve and Angie, that couple at St. Joe Cottleville, I ended up hearing about Franciscan University of Steubenville. And so I was like, this is where I want to go. First, my mom's like, you should go there. I'm like, I don't want to go there. I ended up loving it. I went there, and it was the most amazing experience because everything was Catholic, like in the right way. Like, because, you go to history class, it's Catholic. You have biology, it's Catholic. You have journalism, you're reading the documents of the Vatican about social communications. And so it was an amazing, like, the whole experience was immersed in the faith. And so I joined a household, the Roses of the Immaculate Heart. And I always say it's kind of like a mix between a charismatic prayer group and a sorority. But, like, those other young women, like, we had time of prayer together, we had times of fun together, and we had, like, accountability small groups within our bigger household. And through that, so I graduated with a degree in theology and French, and then I went to grad school at Illinois State. So my senior year of college, for my senior seminar with Dr. Regis Martin, we read Monsignor Giussani's The Risk of Education, and then we read Monsignor Albacetti's book, God at the Ritz. And I read these books, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I had gotten involved when I was in high school with the Missionaries of Charity teaching, like, Sunday school, and I did their summer camp. And so I really started having this experience of, I want to give back to the faith, like, give back to other people what I've received from also. So, like, and so I just said, catechesis is really where my heart is at this point. Like, and especially reading Giussani, I was like, if I taught, like, I wouldn't want to just teach to, impart information. Like, it would be, like, towards discipleship, towards them acting in freedom and responding to God. And so I didn't realize, like, at that point, communion liberation was something in America, because Monsignor Giussani started communion liberation. And so I went to grad school for French literature at Illinois State. And it was one of those things, like, I was not prepared for how secular it was or narrowly focused or anything, because I had never experienced, like, kind of what academics without God is.
Yeah.
And so I had one professor who, she was this smiley little petite woman, and it's like, what's your expertise? She said, wife abuse in 18th century literature.
Yep.
To the classics professor who was Jewish, and I kind of started talking to her because she did believe in God. And so she was a great source of support too. And she's like, just find us Jews. Like that's so my best professors in grad school, I started taking outside of the department. Like and sometimes there were things that it was like, how did I end up here? Because I ended up in a class that was supposed to be about poetic forms and conventions, and it was all like lesbian feminist poetry. And I'm like,
This is not what I signed up for.
like this is, and so I pulled the professor who was Jewish out, and I'm like, I don't think I can even wrap my mind around this poetry. She's like, just show up here, try your best to listen, and I'll give you an A. And I'm like, okay, because it was past the drop point when it started shifting into that.
Yeah.
And then, so I just was like, okay.
So did you ever take the degree?
I did. I did finish it, and it was actually very challenging to get that degree.
Now,
because
at what point then did you begin to consider Catholic religious life?
well, so I ended up my first year there. I started kind of my parallel experience in grad school is that I picked it because one of my friends was the youth minister at the parish in town. And so I also was like kind of full-time helping with the youth group. And so I was
While you're in grad school?
while I was in grad school, like he was the youth minister. I was like, I guess you could say I was discipling a group of girls who were freshmen at the time. And what's really beautiful to see is like now they're in their 30s, this group, and they're all very faithful Catholics. So I feel like that was a worthwhile investment of my time.
Absolutely.
But also, so as I'm sitting here and I've got, this group of girls, I'm doing the different youth group things. I'm like, this is meaningful. This other thing is not. Like, one of these I thought was going to bring me happiness and is not. This is definitely here. And then also I was reading. Like, so I had a theology degree, but I think at that point I had never really been forced to own my faith. Like, it was always a part of my life, but never, I guess, even as I was very close to the Lord, like, I guess I was never, like, it wasn't to that point where it had been tested ever. And so this was that first point. And so I started reading things because my professors would say, like, well, this is what Catholics. I'm like, no, that's not. And so then it turned into like really deep questions about, well, what is grace? And so I started having to read things. And so like I would answer them because I'm like this is bringing me joy. Like, to read about my faith, to like really study God. And so the more I kind of got into this, the more it was kind of a, you know what, this is
where I want to spend my life.
Yeah, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to spend my life teaching the faith. And so also in my first year of grad school, I was kind of talking to one of my household sisters, Ginny, and Ginny said, have you ever looked into communion and liberation? And I said, yeah, but they're just in Italy, right? And she's like, no, they're everywhere. Like, they're in America. So I pulled up the webpage, and sure enough, there was a group in Normal, Illinois. And so I was like, hey. So I emailed the girl that was in charge, Eva, and Eva's like, well, it's kind of just two of us doing the School of Community, but sure. And so Eva became a really good friend of mine. She was doing her doctorate in English, and she had a lot of those same struggles, like not maybe on the same level that I did in my program, but like with her comps at one point, she had a professor because they worded her question in such a way that she's like, I couldn't not answer it with God. She's like, they told me don't answer God anyway, but she's like, I couldn't do it. And so they failed her first attempt at her comps. And so it was like the greatest source of support for me to have that movement. And also at the same time we were reading Why the Church at the time for School of Community. And it was just like, it was that reminder of, all of this stuff that I'm like fighting against in school, like it's really not important. Like what's important is God.
Now,
and
a lot of people listening to the podcast may not know who Jasani is, or Communion and Liberation, or School of Community.
Right.
Can you give us a brief description of what is the idea behind School of Community?
So, School of Community, so Community Liberation was founded in the 50s by Monsignor Luigi Giussani. And he was teaching at a high school, and he was really faced with a lot of the same problems that I was being faced with. He was actually still alive when I was in grad school, so it was kind of neat because he still had these, talks and things being produced by him. But he was in this high school, and like communism was the big thing then. A lot of these kids, like the teachers were promoting atheism, communism, and the kids especially were kind of just eating it up, like without thinking about it. And so Giussani was like, you know what, like we need to have something where these kids like actually own their faith, like that they really become disciples of Christ, true members of the church. And
Because
so
all of Italy was like your experience.
Right.
They were
Yeah.
surrounded by the faith,
Cultural
but they
Catholic.
hadn't connected to it.
Exactly. And so it's that cultural Catholicism where they still would say they're Catholic, even though they have no idea, like, anything about the faith, devotionals or anything. And he started this group of high school kids, and then the high school kids, they would meet together and they would discuss things, and then it would go for that acceptance, like, Jesus really truly is God. And, faced with this, how can I not accept it? Like, that's what's reasonable. And
So School of Community was Giussani's attempt to create sort of the experience that you had going through high school into
Exactly.
college. A group that accompanied you in putting the faith in action in your life. That's
Exactly.
the essence of School of Community.
It is. And so, like, they would say, like, School of Community is always supposed to be transformative. So what I hear, what I share transforms, like, I make a judgment about what I read, but also it's not just that I'm reading it, it's that it transforms me, and that my life with you transforms me. And it's that experience of the Christian life and of the church, really, like what it should be doing to us.
So now, was this the stage of your life when you said, I'm going to investigate religious life, and that brought you eventually to Irondale?
Yeah, it was interesting too, because I was thinking, I still had this plan, like I'm going to go get my doctorate, maybe in a different discipline than French literature, thinking maybe comparative literature at that point, because I'm like, at least then I could bring in other things. But, or I was looking at University of Dallas because it was Catholic and things like that. But I was like, I still have this idea that, this is what I want to do. And then there was this one Sunday that it was weird because my parents had gone on a cruise. Like, it's how God arranges everything. So, like, my mom's boss had offered to buy them a cruise. And she thought she was buying it for, like, a year later. But for whatever reason, it was cheap because it was for, like, 2 weeks from them. And so I was picking them up from the airport. My dad wasn't feeling so good when he got home. And this was, like, summer of 2004. And so I thought, well, I'd always kind of had that attraction to religious life. But somehow that morning it was like, go to St. Anselm for Mass, like 6:30 Mass. Like, and that was like, it was in my brain. And I'd been to St. Anselm one time or 2 times for Mass. One was a memorial Mass for Giussani, or maybe it was 2000, it was before Giussani died, so that was even the 3rd time I went. So the first time and the only time I'd ever been there was for my first cousin once removed wedding when I was in the 5th grade. So, but for whatever reason, I just had this desire to go to Mass at St. Anselm that night. And so my mom, she hadn't been to Mass, so she's like, we got to go to Mass, so we going to go to Incarnate Word? And I said, no, I want to go to St. Anselm tonight. And she's like, why? I'm like, I don't know, just want to go to St. Anselm. It's at 6:30, so we went shopping. It's kind of the reverse of the original, like getting me into Life Teen. But so we sit there in the parking lot, and she's like, we could still go to Incarnate Word. It's 6. We'll be there in a few minutes. We'll just be a few minutes late. And I'm like, no, let's go there. And so we went, and Father Augustine Weta, who gives confirmation retreats now at Casa Maria, he was processing in. And it was funny because I didn't know he had been ordained at that point. And he was also writing his homily as he was processing in. And so, or at least he was writing notes. Like, he had a piece of paper and a pencil, and he's writing. And so he's like, I was sent here, something changed at the last minute, so I'm preaching this mass. And so he got up there, and he was preaching this homily that he had been writing as he was walking in. And he said, this morning, he said, my good friend left from a visit, and, he's this soap opera star, and he had everything, and here I am, like, he leaves, and I have to go say mass at the nursing home, and everybody's falling asleep, and, like, my life is so unglorious and everything. But he's like, basically, because the readings that day were the vanity of vanity readings, which I had never thought about. So he's like, so what's this mean, vanity of vanities? And so he was talking about how he had been going to grad school for classics, and then he became a monk because, his reflection on his whole life after the experience of his friend visiting. And so he said, so at the end, he's like, it's a beautiful life. So he said, so my prayer is that for anybody here that's not married, or, because I was thinking of religious life and I didn't know how to tell my mom. And so it's like, if anybody is not married, you're going to be monks and nuns. And so, like, there was nobody else in the whole church that was, like,
This
young.
applied only to you.
It really only applied to me. So we get in the car, and my mom goes, so Father Augustine says you're going to be a nun, which was the first time that I had ever, like, really talked about it to my mom at that point. So it was nice that I had a way of breaking the ice. And it's funny because, like, so later on it became really clear, I bought a ticket to the Sister Servants, like, within 2 months, because my friend's sister, she's a sister now, so my household sister, Alyssa, ended up, she got a job as a DRE in Tennessee. And so her priest that she worked for had been taught by Mother Mary Gabriel when he was in grade school.
The foundress of your community.
Our community. And so he said, the only place I'll let you bring the kids for confirmation retreat is to Casa Maria. And so he goes, okay. So she came down and she's like, you'd really like this order, I think. And I'm like,
was it the catechetical nature of the order that appealed to you?
At that point, yeah, I liked that, but it was just, like, the best way to describe it, like Mother Teresa said, like, when somebody's discerning religious life, you just kind of know. And so I had been attracted to this order in St. Louis called the Sisters of St. Francis of the Martyr St. George. And they had worked at my youth group too, so it was nice because we always had young sisters too, which was another witness of that. And so I thought, if I joined, I'd join them. They're near St. Louis, it's perfect, and I really love Franciscan spirituality. And so she said, you should go check them out. I'm like, no way. And she actually gave my phone number, my cell phone number, to Mother Louise Marie, who was the vocation director at the time. And so I was driving one day, and I get this phone call. And it's Mother Louise Marie just saying, oh, hi, Jenny, how are you doing? And I'm like, who is this person, like, calling me? And because she had told her all about me, basically, while she was down here. And so she's like, oh, you live in Normal, that's a riot, like, all this stuff. And I'm just thinking, this is so crazy. And then, so I got this email about a month later after that said, like, United was having a fair sale. And the first place that came to my mind was Birmingham. Like, what's in Birmingham? What's in Birmingham? And then I'm like, I guess those sisters are in Birmingham. Maybe I'll go and just rule it out. And so I kept trying to call the sisters, like, can I come visit? I've got this time in October, I could come. And I kept getting the voicemail, so I kept leaving these messages. Nobody's getting back to me. So finally I just said, I'm going to buy the ticket. I'm just going to go down there. We'll figure it out. So I bought the ticket, and I left a message saying, I just bought the ticket, so I'm coming this weekend, that weekend in October. And they're like, can you come a different time? I'm like, nope, I got this ticket, sorry. But it was funny because I just kept getting delayed, and it was like 4 a.m. and she came to pick me up at the airport, and it was like I just knew like that this is, without even meeting anybody else, that this is where I was supposed to be. And it wasn't like it was immediate, because that was like October of 2004, and then it was probably, I had student loans from college, so I applied in March of 2005 to enter, and then I joined in 2006.
So you've been here since 2006.
Yeah.
You know, what amazes me about your story, what interests me is, from what I know about your life here at Casa Maria and what you've told me, it sounds like your whole life was a formation to keep doing what you've always been doing well and better, right?
Yes.
That, you know, a lot of times we think about the meaning of our life, oh, when I get to the future, my life will start. You know, when I cross some threshold, my life will begin. Your life began when it began, and you've been living in this growing relationship with Christ and His church. And you didn't have to wait to enter religious life.
No.
Religious life was the fulfillment and continuation of what God had been doing.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
Now, I know we've only got about a minute left or so. Yeah, I wanted to get a little bit to your work in Birmingham with families and catechesis.
Sure.
Because now you want to give back all this that you've been given. You're trying to give it to our community.
Right. So I've been, in our diocese, I've worked kind of at different capacities. Like I've helped with the Awakenings retreats here, giving talks to the college kids. And then also I've done some work like forming parents through family catechesis at Annunciation in Decatur. But kind of recently what I've been really doing is this catechetical program called Come Follow Me, which it's a French program that was developed by the followers of Blessed Marie Eugene of the Child
But
Jesus.
it's in English, right?
It's in English,
Yep.
yeah. And so it's translated by a French sister who lives in an English Dominican community called the Dominican Sisters of St. Joseph. And it's really teaching children how to respond. So it's that same idea of even what I love about...
Start by buying them a Slurpee.
Yeah, well, no, but before that, yeah, Slurpees work for me. I don't know if they work down... They don't have 7-Eleven down here. So, but, so we have, I guess it's teaching them, like, it's almost like Lectio Divina for little kids. Because Blessed Marie Eugene had said, you know, children who have been baptized but who haven't reached the age of reason, that they have this capacity for a relationship with God. They don't have any sin to block them. And I read that in a talk he had given. I'm like, this is true. Like, this is what we believe about baptism and grace and everything. And so I looked into the program and I was like, this is an amazing thing. And so we've done it in I've done it in 2 different settings. So we did one with homeschoolers at the convent, and then I did it with the 2nd graders at St. Barnabas.
St. Barnabas Parish here in Birmingham.
Yeah, and it was an interesting...
So really, you're trying to solve the problem you had as a child.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't want somebody to just live in a Catholic community. I want them to know Christ.
Exactly.
Let me teach them how to find Christ as they read the Scriptures.
Right, and make that choice to follow Him too. Like, not just because this is the culture or anything, and especially at St. Barnabas where nobody was Catholic really. Out of 10 kids, it was 2 Catholics. And one of my kids actually ended up getting baptized at the Baptist church. So I made a Baptist out of him.
Good.
But he showed up. It was funny because it's also how grace works. So he just randomly walked into family catechesis at St. Barnabas that another one, hey, sister, everybody. He's like, do you know that Catholics can be forgiven of their sins whenever they want? They just go to confession. Like, this is amazing. Like, he's like, they can just go and they can say they're sorry and they can be forgiven. Like, this is amazing. And so the lesson had said, you know, you could have a priest there if the children are receiving confession. And so since my children were not receiving confession, I had them make hearts with their names on it. And they said, you know, this isn't really your heart, but it represents your heart. So, and I had a picture of the Sacred Heart up. It said, so I want you to think about what you would say to Jesus to ask him to heal your hearts. You know, go to God and say, you know, I'm so sorry, you know, heal me, forgive my sins. and really kneel before Jesus and just tell him, you know, what's in your heart. And so Otis wrote on his heart, which I still have it because he gave it to Jesus, but I took it. But it said, "Dear Jesus, heal my heart. I want to be Catholic because I want my sins to be forgiven." And so I was like,
That's amazing. You know,
like, that's an amazing.
G.K. Chesterton, the great British author, they asked him when he became Catholic, why did you become Catholic? And he said, well, to get rid of my sins.
Yeah.
G.K. Chesterton and Otis have that in common. That's wonderful. Well, we're going to wrap up. So as we wrap up, what's the takeaway for people who are listening to the podcast? Is there any way they can get involved what would you suggest for people who want to sort of either learn from your spirituality and put that in practice in their own parish or life, or maybe something that Casa Maria is involved in that they could invite people to?
Yeah, so we have, I would say, really learn your faith. Like, take that time because it's really important. We're doing work with Christ Life too. And so I know that that's going on diocesan-wide too, throughout the different parishes. And Christ Life is a really beautiful tool, like a group to learn about Jesus and to kind of develop the faith, and also to develop like that idea of discipleship, and then it also forms you to go out and share that
Okay,
too.
so you'd encourage people
So
to
I'd say
take advantage of Christ Life.
Christ Life is a really good tool for that, but just to really, you know, be present, to avail yourselves of the sacraments, like receive them, and read, you know, the librarian in me, read always, but also, you know, look for those opportunities to share your faith. Like, it might be with people that you work with or people that you just run across, because, like, especially for me as a sister, it's really easy because people see me and they say, oh, you know, this is what I'm thinking right now, or whatever. And, you know, I'm dealing with this. How can you help me with this? And so, you know, like, that personal friendship goes a long way, because that's been my whole life experience. I know
It's beautiful.
for my mother, like, that was really what got her into the faith. It's really what developed my faith. And
if people want to learn more about the ministry at Casa Maria and the Sister Servants, where would they go to find out?
we have sisterservants.org is our website, and we
Okay.
have all of our retreats right now pretty much are live streamed also, so,
Fantastic.
and they're free.
Wonderful.
So
people could get more of Sister
Exactly.
Madeline Marie and all the sisters if they log on to sisterservants.org.
and a bunch of other good priests too.
Fantastic. All
Yeah.
right. Well, sister, this has been fantastic,
Yeah,
and I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today.
thank you.
Okay, thanks for listening to Living Catholic. My producer has handed me the text. If you're looking for ways to get engaged in Christ life, check out our contact. Well, Alex Kubik, right? And the Office of Discipleship and Mission at the diocese. All right, in our next episode, I'm going to speak to Father Jonathan Howell to discuss how the parish is a family of families. If you enjoy our show, subscribe to us on YouTube or using your favorite podcast app. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating or review. Finally, please recommend us to friends and family. We'd love to continue speaking with you in this special year focused on encountering Christ in our parish and in the Eucharist. Thank you.
Thank you.